So hello, everybody. My name is Erin Rushai. I am a network engagement assistant over here at Candid. I'm in our New York City office today. It is a bright but kind of crisp morning, or actually technically afternoon, I guess, here in New York. And welcome to our How to Engage Local Grantmakers for Broader Impact session. This is the first fin track of our second day of network days. And I am joined today by Ellen Collins, who is the Associate Director at the Mississippi Alliance of Nonprofits and Philanthropy. So Ellen, I'm going to be turning things over to you. We have a great panel of folks with us today. And Ellen, over to you.
Good morning, and thank you, Erin. Good morning to everyone who's joining us today, or afternoon, depending on where you are, and welcome to our session. We have three great panelists with us today, and I will briefly introduce them to you. First, we have Kristen Walker Collins. She's the Chief Operating Officer of the Foundation for Appalachian Kentucky, and I hope I got that right, Kristen. Thank you. And also we have Tori Ergang, who is the Executive Director for the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation. Thank you. And also joining us is Michael Yanis. Michael is Vice President of Public Health Research and Learning at the Pittsburgh Foundation. And so we're welcoming all of our panelists here today, and we will get started. First, I'd like to ask from each of you to just tell us more about your work in the region where you're working in, and the typical nonprofit that reaches out or connects with you for resources. And I'll start that off with Kristen.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. As Ellen introduced, I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Foundation for Appalachian Kentucky. We are headquartered in Hazard, Kentucky. I'm sure everyone has heard of it, but we are very rural. And so we serve a broad region of our state, all of the Appalachian Regional Commission designated counties in Kentucky. There are 54 of them. And so that is our region that we serve. And we see nonprofits with $1 million operating budgets that are high performing, and we partner with them a lot on big projects that go out. We do a lot of impact investing in projects that they have. But really the most that we see routinely from our nonprofits are small, very, very niche, community-based, almost holler-based nonprofits that are serving their little corner of the community that they live in. And so they don't have staff. It's a lot of volunteer-led organizations. It's a lot of people that when you ask for a budget, they can give you receipts. And so we can talk about this a little bit later on about how to engage with local grant makers, and how grant makers can adapt for these situations. But our philosophy is to meet our partners, grantee partners, where they are. We're not trying to make them jump through all these hoops to get results. We really, they know their communities better than we do, and that is where we trust them. So it's a lot of trust-based philanthropy that we do, and a lot of meeting them where they are. Like I said, they and this comes, from me personally. I run a nonprofit as well, and it's all volunteer led. And we try to go for high impact, but we also need help too. So I'll pass that on.
Well, we'll ask Tori if she will jump in and tell us more about where she's from.
Thank you, Ellen. So the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation is located in the southwestern corner of New York State, almost to Pennsylvania, if you can, right on the border with Pennsylvania, as far from New York City, Erin, as you can be and still be in the same state. We are a place that has 1,100 square miles that is primarily rural. We have 2 population centers in our grant making area that we refer to as cities, but they are around under 20,000 residents in each of them. And I would say we are a community that's been deeply impacted by loss of industry over the last 70 years. And so we have high rates of poverty. We have high rates of child poverty. We have a growing diversity in our community. We are a community that 70 years ago looked very different than it looks today. Our foundation specifically was founded in 1978. And so it's been a journey for us as our community looks different than it did in 1978. So does our foundation, and so do our foundation priorities and processes. We grant about $4 million every year into the local community in a combination of scholarships to individuals pursuing job training and higher education. About a third of the money that we put into the community is in the form of scholarship. And then another third is pushed out. As folks familiar with community foundations know, we hold agency endowment funds that we manage for nonprofits. We also hold donor designated funds that have been set up, and those dollars get pushed out to nonprofits, not through a grant application. And then we hold some donor advised funds that allow us to work with individuals who have charitable and philanthropic interests and match those with community needs. So that's another third of what we do. And the final third, and my favorite part, and what I hope we'll talk more about today, has to do with our competitive grant making. And Kristen queued it up perfectly. We hold these funds. We are stewards of the funds, but they're not our dollars. They're individual, generous folks from our community over the last 100 years have helped to put these funds in place. And our responsibility is to the community to see that those dollars are put into the community in a manner that is efficient, that is not burdensome, that we only ask for the types of information that impact our decision making and are essential, or in fact bring value to the grantee, the grant seeker. So we do that through a kind of a small, a medium, and a large grant making process, and we have names for all of those things. But what we've learned over time is that while we might ask certain questions of our largest grantees, those that might be seeking a $500,000 grant, we're not going to ask the same questions. We're not going to apply the same level of due diligence or rigor to a grantee seeking a $4,000 grant. So we're able to interact with a variety of organizational sizes through that small grant making. And you shouldn't have favorites, but I would say that's some of my favorite grant making we do. We interact with volunteer-led not-for-profit organizations that have no staff, maybe one part-time staff member. We're also unique. We're able to grant money to churches thanks to some very specific types of funds that were set up here many years ago. And that has been the grant making that allows us to be really deeply embedded in community, in outlying rural communities, in communities of color. And so perhaps that's all why some of that is my favorite. And I would say in general, some of the commonality we're seeing in grant applications across all three sizes have to do with technology upgrades, updates, and ensuring that the nonprofits have the capacity to deliver services in an ever more virtual or less in-person world. And also that people in the community, residents of our community from all ages, have access to the internet through local libraries when when that has become very essential. So I'd say that's kind of been a surprise in our grant making in the last 2.5 years. Before COVID-19, we wouldn't have imagined we'd be doing as much technological, supporting technological purchases as much as we are. And I'll kind of hold there and just offer that we also are a collaborative funder in a nonprofit capacity building initiative for our county.
Thank you, Tori. Michael, tell us more about the Pittsburgh Foundation.
Hi, Ellen. Thanks so much. And it's great to be part of the panel and great to be part of the session as a representative of the Pittsburgh Foundation. We're located here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and southwestern Pennsylvania. And our catchment areas primarily for our foundation directed grant making is here in Allegheny County. But honestly, for the sake of time, I just think that, Kristen, what you described in terms of the grant making strategies and sort of breadth of nonprofits in which you serve match really well. We have, Tori, as you sort of mentioned, we have grant programs that are one called Small and Mighty that is very much dedicated to working with small Black and Brown led organizations here in Allegheny County that we did some very purposeful outreach and learning from with our colleagues here in the program department and learned that a lot of people throw that grant application over the wall and they never heard back like 8-9 years ago. We've done a lot of very strategic work to make our boundaries much more permeable, and things that we'll talk about, Ellen, that I think you're going to ask about later, of ways to make us extremely accessible and really accountable to the community in ways to do trust-based philanthropy in a way that feels right, that's really respectful. And then Tori, I think you did a fantastic job of describing the composition of a community foundation by the donor-directed side. You know, our grant making is about 11 to 12 million a year on our foundation-directed work, but our donor services side and works with donors, about 2,600 donors here that make up the bulk of our work, and are really thankful that they trust us to work and serve and support them. But the large majority of our grant making, almost 50 million, can get just sort of flies over our department and goes to those giving needs. But we have a lot of collaboration throughout the foundation to do a lot of learning with donors, learning with community, bridging those gaps in many ways as well. But we're extremely accountable to the community that we serve here and focusing on economically underserved, but incredibly rich and strong and really expert community partners in many different settings, with some strategic focus on areas around eviction housing, criminal justice reform and juvenile justice reform, and then areas around serving communities and really meeting them, just as you said, where they are, right? So really strengths-based learning as a community foundation, because that's the service that we're really proud and excited to do. So I'll hold back on other details because I think you all captured it really well. So ditto what they said.
Great. Well, since we kind of got into that about the innovative grant making strategies, you all talk about, you serve small nonprofits that sometimes don't have the capacity to, or the staffing to deal with long grant applications or even weighty reporting requirements. Tell me more about what you have done, some innovative strategies that you have employed to ensure that nonprofits have access to your resources. And I can start off. Tori, why don't you start that off and tell us more?
So we're I think we're a unique community that, as small as we are, I mean, I think about Pittsburgh, which is such a much larger place with a lot of philanthropic partners. But in the city of Jamestown, which is located in Chautauqua County, we have about 9 private foundations, and they range in size. And so what emerged 10 years ago or more is a common website that the community foundation administers, helps to host and keep up to date. But it's a one-stop, and it's actually called Chautauqua Grants. And that's the domain name. It's very simple. If you can spell Chautauqua, it's a one-stop for grant seeking. And while some of those foundations, some of the other funders do not accept online applications, or they might accept an application in a different format, you can get grantees and grant seekers can find information about the deadlines, the types of questions they're asking, contact information for those funders. And I'm really proud that we continue to do that work. We have at times tried to have a common application among all of those funders, and that has been a challenge, and I'll just leave it there.
Okay, Kristen?
So we are not blessed with as many foundations as Tori is. That just blows my mind that you have so many private foundations in your community, and that is fabulous. So we, our community foundation works in an affiliate model. So we have affiliate community foundations in several different counties around our region. And so we rely heavily on those board members to be the front face of the foundation where they are. And so they are the movers and the shakers. They know people. We also encourage our staff to serve on boards and to get to know nonprofits in the region of things that they are interested in. As Michael mentioned earlier, we do kind of also have some big themes that we work in, entrepreneurship and economic development, food security work, access to quality, affordable childcare, and criminal justice reform, which is not the term that we want to continue using, but are still trying to figure that out. And so we have these bodies of work that we are represented in and how we work, but we want to make sure that we are seeing the people that are doing the work. So we rely heavily on our affiliate board members. And we do have our online application. Our application is online, but we have also printed off a PDF and sent it to someone, and they handwrite it and send it back in, and we'll accept it. I mean, that's just, you know, the theme of meeting them where they are, really helping them along. So, okay, so maybe you need some training in how to access an online application or what that looks like. So we have created a nonprofit support services that does some of that technical assistance training for nonprofits around technology, around strategic planning, and then also around grant writing. So helping them learn those skills on how to do the grant writing, how to just go ahead and have you know, an informational paragraph written out so that you can copy and paste it. You're not having to redo it every single time. And so we found that that has worked. There's a lot of work still to be done that we're always learning about and always trying to create. I think the biggest thing is that we don't stop trying, right? So we don't have like a deadline for grants and then, oh, sorry, you're done. We have a rolling deadline, you know, we have a rolling application. It's available. And so we make sure that people know that they can apply and see where it best fits. And it might not work this time, but let's see how we can improve it and work with you there. So that's where we are.
Okay, great. Sounds great. Michael, I know you're just ready to tell us about the innovative things going on in Pittsburgh.
Can't wait. No, so I mean, much similar to this sort of philosophy and approach of being accessible and permeable, and you know, I think similarly, as I've heard from Kristen and Tori, is moving our work from ways that are transactional alone, but being really in relationship with people too. So this is just but a blip of how we know each other, how we're going to work together. The foundation is involved in both lots of regional convening, a lot of research and work in the area that's guided by community interest, a lot of public policy work as a community foundation. So a lot of the work that we do is also trying to do systems change work, and then also grant making. So we look at that as multiple strategies for how to deepen our relationship and really learning from people as well. But some really specific ways that we've worked very hard. And I think, Kristen, I like how you described that. We're just continually also eliciting responses, and some formally, but really informally based on the relationships of how we can do better. We've streamlined our grant application to get rid of a whole lot of nonsense. We have revised our budget format because every other budget format we've tried stinks. So we said, well, give us the budget that then makes the most sense to you. And we have a couple of category spaces that then help us do our write-up for the board. Probably the most popular one recently is we said, if you've submitted a grant for this same application material, feel free to upload it. And we don't have to change the name. We don't care who it went to. You can send us that application. And then as part of our program officer work, then we follow up and say, like, we don't care if it says Heinz Endowments or someone, but there might be some things to tailor for what they're asking to us. That's been really popular. And people thought it was a joke. It's not a joke. We really want to take your application from another foundation. And then also finding ways to create more than money type of activities, which are information sessions. So I do like an evaluation. I'm at the researcher evaluator here on this side, as well as a grant maker. So we do have like an evaluation 101, but it walks through our follow reporting process to say, these are the kind of questions. We don't want a logic model. We really want to know at the end of the day, what did success look like for you? But then it's our responsibility, and we're working now much harder on how do we use that data and share it back. We also have more than money activities to help grantees meet other foundation members in our region. But I really love this idea of a clearinghouse that you were talking about, Kristen, where people can go to, but to help with that connection so they can leverage our dollars to help hopefully get support to support their really good work as well. There are lots of people who are like, I don't get your website. I cannot figure out Foundant because we have an online application. So our support staff and our administrative staff, Joe Ritchie on our team, is sort of always the catchment to help with that. But we also have standard office hours that people can sign up and talk with us. We often almost everyone offers to read their application before it goes in so we can make little notes. So really developing a relationship, because for those big nonprofits that have a development team, this is what they do. But the vast majority who are coming in our door, and we want to welcome, and I think we have like 18 to 30% of new people coming each round, which is sort of mind-blowing because of some of the outreach. This is really frightening, right? And they don't know what kind of to expect. And so, yes, it is very common for me to write aspects of applications with people and make sure that, share it back, that it works with them as well. But also people who are used to writing to one foundation, it might, we want them to be aligned to our priorities too. So some of this is really relationship building. I would say this is a difficult conversation to have, to say it's a really good grant, but it didn't get funded. we also work very hard to talk to the people that got declined to say, well, then what's your next application? How do we make sure to get that in our door if it's right and aligned and others? So I'd say that we work really hard to check our assumptions, to be culturally humble as best we can in every way, and to be accessible. We're downtown and kind of a fancier place downtown, so making sure to get into the community is a big part of that, and post-COVID's been really helpful. But part of just as much of our side of doing this work is also working with our donor services team and others, so everyone's talking about the foundation's priorities in much the same way. It doesn't mean we don't make mistakes, but we try to own them pretty quickly and correct them. So I feel really lucky to be part of a place that's kind of a continuous learning framework model. We're also measuring and doing a lot of part of a new strategic plan, and then I'll be quiet, is doing a lot of really focused measures and metrics related to our work, not just quantitative data, but working to build a real qualitative side to understand the how and why behind those numbers. That's meant to, what I love about our foundation director, President Lisa Schroeder, saying this isn't about building all the things we do great. We actually want to uncover the things we're not doing well and understand that's part of our learning. We want to be open and transparent about it, get away from perfectionism, and sort of white supremacy culture in that way. And how do we move into a space of learning and action? And that means we have to be listening a lot.
Right.
But like my colleague said, a lot of what they do too.
Yeah. Well, you all have shared some really great innovative strategies and approaches to your grant making. And I think this kind of leads to this question. Have you seen that these approaches have allowed you to kind of dismantle or disrupt what you see as inequitable access to philanthropic dollars? Or, you can jump in. I see heads nodding, so I'm gonna just take Kristen, I saw you nod first.
I'll let Tori go because she unmuted.
Okay.
Well, I was just going to say, part of what in our community, there is a relatively finite number of nonprofits, and there are not, while there are always new nonprofits being incorporated, it's not fast paced. So 1 or 2 new organizations are formed in a given year, and we don't have organizations that serve specific target populations or demographic groups who do similar work, but in different neighborhoods or communities. We tend to have county-wide nonprofits, and they're serving a variety of demographic groups. So when we looked at how we could make sure that our process was reaching having greater access and reaching diverse communities and people of color, it wasn't necessarily as easy as it may have been if we were in a larger community or in a bigger with more population. So some of our grant making that we do to faith-based communities is the way that we are reaching diverse communities, bringing people closer to grant making and to philanthropy. We use a very community-driven decision-making process. So all of the grant making is all of the grants are evaluated by community volunteers. And so one of the first places we looked was, let's look at the demographics of our grant and scholarship review teams and make sure that those groups are as diverse as they can be. And if not, let's bring more voices there. And we actually, for a long time, we shied away from having nonprofit staff on those grant review teams because of conflicts of interest. Mm-hmm. Well, even in a small community like ours, we're able to manage conflicts all the time. And so we said, why are we doing this? We have some of the best insights and the best perspectives sitting inside all of our nonprofit organizations. And we also strengthen those organizations' ability to approach both our foundation and other foundations once they kind of dismantle the mystery of what is a grant making due diligence process. Like, what are those volunteers talking about? Well, here you can be a part of it. And so I think that's been another way, so it's both in making grants to sort of non-traditional grantees, in our case, faith-based organizations, not allowing things like fiscal sponsorship to be a barrier, right? We have rules and regulations as a community foundation. And in the state of New York, we actually get some extra regulations because that's how we like to do things. But we don't need to hide behind those. We can actually say, how do we develop the strategies and the tools to work around any barrier that pops up?
So I'll jump in now. So as Tori mentioned, it's very similar in Appalachia. People tend to think Appalachia is very white, and we try to dispel that myth. Granted, I'm white and I'm here on the screen and I'm representing Appalachia for you right now, but we do, there are some of our programs, especially the nonprofit support services that I mentioned earlier, we set out and hit, 25% of that program is serving BIPOC-led organizations. That's what that program is meant to do. And so in our grant making, very similarly, so we have, we did add a question to our grant application around the demographics of the board and of the people served. And so we track that and we tell them, you click, check the box. And if you don't check the box. It's not gonna hurt either way. We need to know these things so that we can have the research to show that we are either A, hitting our targets on the populations that we want to serve, or that we're not. And then we need to try something else and bring in some innovative ideas on how to reach populations that we're not reaching. And the majority of our populations are underserved anyway, but we do have some specific grant making around children in certain communities, around food security, but making sure we do that. But I am really proud of the work around the nonprofit support services to help build up BIPOC and queer-led organizations to make sure that they are getting access to technical assistance that will help them grow. And then I'll hand it off to Michael.
Thank you. Yeah, I think in a, building building on what's already been said, some specific ways that we're looking is we have, some core values that guide our work. One is around racial justice and racial equity. So making sure that we're really purposeful about engaging Black, Indigenous people of color in our grant making processes in different ways through advisory structures, but then also making sure that we're tracking our data so we're not making assumptions. So we do have advisory boards that guide this work. Those boards are compensated for their time and expertise, and others in ways that are really structurally supporting our work. We also have, as part of that work, we started with a pilot called Small and Mighty, like I mentioned before. And that's because we found when we looked at our data 6-7 years ago with my colleague, Michelle McMurray, who runs our program and community engagement team, is that we were supporting a lot of really large white-led organizations year after year after year. So when we look at the data and we understood that, we were able to make some institutional goals and share that also with our donor services side to make sure that we were bringing more small Black and brown-led organizations into our team and into our fold. So some ways we measure that metric, and we've seen anywhere from a 20 to 50% increase in the numbers of those organizations in our grant portfolio. One way is that we look to see that our annual grantees of those large organizations go down because we only have so much money. So where are we going to invest it? So those have significantly dropped to only 1 to 3 now remaining sort of annual grantees that were part of that original pool. We've shifted our annual grantees to be more aligned with some of our grant making priorities, as I just described. In addition, looking to see how many of those small and mighty organizations who've been a part of our network in many ways have moved to our regular grant making. So no longer part of a pilot program that we're actually phasing out. These are now the grantees that we work and serve all the time. And then we've seen, again, an increase in the Black and brown-led organizations and serving organizations increased in some areas, like our out-of-school time program have gone from like 15% to almost 55% in our last grant making round. But you asked a good question, like, Alan, how do we know if it's sort of working? Well, our grant applications have gone through the roof, like to the point that it's almost, we've actually reduced our grant number of sessions per year to really try to keep up, because we now have an interim grant making cycle for grants that are now under $50,000, which is a really great push by my colleague, Michelle, to get those, they can come in and be out the door within 3 weeks, because many small organizations can't wait 3 to 5 months. We need to be responsive and moving more quickly. So for those smaller grants and smaller budgets, we get those out the door much more quickly, but then also tracking the race and demographic and data for each of those grants has been really important. And that doesn't stay within our program department. We report it to leadership and the board as well. So are we really accountable as a whole structure? And then our goal is in the coming year with our strategic plan is to make that data more public. Not only just the data itself, but how we get that data so that we make sure that we're getting really good fidelity from that, from the community, and support people in collecting that information as well.
Okay.
How was that? If I get kind of blah about data, so if it sounds like nonsense, let me know.
I could understand it, Michael, so it must be great. We have a question from one of our participants, I think kind of aligns with what we've just been discussing. And it comes from Sean. Sean, I won't try to pronounce your last name, but the question is, how do funders view or see the active landscape of nonprofit programs and project activity in their geographical areas? And how do you keep track of what's coming up in the pipeline from nonprofits, what's taking place now, and how to find what's not on your radar from BIPOC-led nonprofits or community-based organizations? Anybody want to take a stab at that?
I mean, I'll jump in to start, and we can hopefully go back and forth. So understanding the landscape, I think the one way we learn, just to be, hopefully normal and transparent, is, people apply to us. And so they look at our goals and our subject areas. They reach out for information to program officers. But then we also are really purposeful about saying, do you have more questions? Do any of your colleagues have more questions? And how do we get out into the community? And then sending information out to make sure we're more accessible through, like I mentioned, those office hours. And then we have a series of webinars. But the concern is we often don't hear from people. And so how do we make sure to be out there? We, as part of our meetings, we ask questions and we try to be more accessible. Part of what our colleagues, we do have a lot of foundations in the Pittsburgh area, which is really great, is we also work together with colleagues in certain grant making areas. Like, so for the youth justice work, actually I said criminal justice earlier, but we talk about youth justice, and the work we're doing here is we work together with our colleagues to find out who's on your agenda, who's on our agenda, and often we're learning in that way as well. But the way we do this is by the grantees we work with most closely, we ask, who are we missing? Who should be in our fold, and what are we doing right or wrong in different ways as well? One of my favorite stories is a grantee who's applied 4 times now, who has not been funded because it doesn't align with our guidelines. But I spend a lot of time with Tish on the phone and other ways to get into other foundations, but also as a colleague and a friend in this area, because the kind of work she's doing doesn't align with our guidelines, but it's really great work. So how do we help advance that as well? So being as open as possible. But that also means also having an equity and a diversity focus at the foundation as well, in our hiring practices and our outreach, who we contract with, who do we hire for catering. And so being really purposeful on our diversity focus at the foundation. And that goes beyond just our program side, but even our development and donor services side and our finance side. Who are the financial advisors that they're working with? So we have a racial justice and racial equity focus across the foundation. We've seen real changes in our hiring practices, but then our contracting practices more broadly. And we are constantly working on that. That's something we have to do as a, traditionally white-led, philanthropic practice. That's something we have to always be really conscious of. And it's a priority of accountability in our annual reviews, which we're doing right now, and how we focus on this work moving forward.
I'll jump in here. I don't know how many people are aware. At the end of July of this year, Eastern Kentucky was the victim to catastrophic flooding in 11 FEMA declared counties. Nearly 40 people died. It has been awful. The Foundation for Appalachian Kentucky immediately opened a the Appalachian Crisis Aid Fund to help with flood relief. In the last 3 months, so typically our foundation puts out around $3 million a year or so in grant making. In the last 3 months, we've done $5.5 million in grant making, and that has been in the form of grants to impacted nonprofits, businesses, small businesses, entrepreneurs, social enterprises, small family farms, and then we've done about 8,000 grants to individuals just that were impacted by flooding. And I say all of that to bring up the who are we missing conversations, because in times of crisis, you see organizations, churches, individuals that pop up that are the helpers, right? So it's, look for the helpers. And so we have really made an effort and been blessed completely with the amount of helpers that have risen to the challenge of what has impacted our communities. It's a very much a breadth and a depth of the impact that this flood has had on the region. And so thinking specifically about Black and Brown led organizations, there have been so many that, especially religious institutions, groups that come in and feed communities, or just set up a food truck and are just feeding the community in the aftermath. And so we did a lot of grant making. For the flood specifically, we set up a policy that was, if somebody writes into us and says we need this money because of this, or if we hear about it, we can pass it along. And as long as 2 of the 4 leadership, and that included our internal leadership as well as our board chair, as long as 2 of the 4 approved it, we were sending a check. And so that really cut down on a lot of the red tape and, you know, all of the application process and all of that. We needed an email that literally said how much they wanted and what they were going to do with it. And that was it. And so we found that a lot of the funding that we have done went to mostly the 4 majorly impacted counties. So the majority of the money went to those 4 counties, which was really good. But we also just didn't sit in our office. Granted, I sat in my office, but that's because I was doing the, making sure the grants got processed. But we sent out people into communities and go door to door, set up next to the FEMA trailer, set up next to the food tent to make sure that we were getting people signed up for this application. It was an online application. We're trying to figure out with our vendor the better way to do this the next time, because we know there will be a next time. But taking applications over the phone, calling people, having a team of volunteers to call people, and making sure that we were in the communities that were the hardest hit. We also, we do not have a research department. We have like 7 of us on staff, but luckily one of our employees had previously taken a map making class, and so she was able to put a heat map based on the addresses over top of the region that was impacted, the FEMA flood maps, to see where we had missed, what communities had we missed. So we realized that Highway 476 here in Perry County had not gotten a lot of applications in. Well, you know why? Because the road was out and the internet and no power. And so we sent people out there to go and get applications from Highway 476. And so to figure out where they are, we went to the shelters, the emergency shelters, and instead of, mailing checks, people have no mailboxes, they have no homes. We took them to the shelters. We would make drop-off dates and make sure people were there. We would call them. One of the application questions was, if we can't get in touch with you, who is a trusted person that we can contact? And so, because it was pure chaos of where people didn't know where they were going to be staying for that night, let alone a week later. We put out our first checks 5 days after the grant, or after the flooding happened. It has been very much a monumental effort to get this money out the door as quickly as possible without as many strings, but then also trying to make it equitable across the region. I do want to lift up an organization that they started feeding people, and it was at Pikeville Pride. It's an LGBTQ led and focused organization. And so they have now become one of our grantees in another pot of grant making that we do because of their work in the flood and how community focused they have been in the work that they are doing. And they were not an organization that we had been closely tied with, but now we are. I'm really proud of the work that they are doing, and in awe of the work that they are doing. And so it has just been amazing to see who the helpers are and learn more about what they are doing and what their plans are. So that's my spiel.
All right, great. But this leads me to another question, Kristen, just hearing the things that you all have helped to support in your community during a crisis. But grant makers are all looked to for, capital and financial resources. But there are times that we can, as funders, we can bring other forms of capital other than financial means. So can one of you tell us about the way you support your grantees or communities through non-financial means? Michael?
Sure. Yeah, we actually talk about this a lot because it's a kind of a misnomer to think that somehow the money is the only thing. Reputational capital, social capital, networks can be so important, specifically for creating spaces, like I mentioned earlier, for, so much of, if you get funding, it's based on that sort of social network you have and who do you know where. And so making sure that, the communities that are, traditionally and sort of historically marginalized from this access can get in the fray and actually have their expertise shine. So creating lots of events and opportunities from an advisory structure and meeting other nonprofits is really critical. One area I would say that we try really hard now also is to listen and learn and think about what are the policy and advocacy efforts that many of our community experts and partners feel prioritized, whether that's fees and fines in our youth justice, the criminal justice system and impacting young people, policies and practices related to eviction that we know have been really critical around the time of COVID, and making sure to bring that expertise to the table and guiding that in our work and advancing that, not just locally, but really even doing statewide advocacy work around telemedicine, which we've gotten really involved with and had 108 organizations around the country, nonprofits, participate in that process too. So like ways that we can do that, but then also I think the way that we can be most effective is by being responsive and listening to what people need too. So that means we have to be willing to pivot a little bit, and maybe put some of our administrative or maybe structural priorities to the side a little bit and listen to really where people are working and prioritizing. And I would just call out what Kristen said, which brought a lot of great learnings, I'm sure, for those on the call or on the session today too, is COVID provided some really frightening and challenging times for us, but it also was an incredible learning experience of like, why do we have all these rules? Like we turned all of our grants into operating grants like overnight and said, hey, use it the way you need it because no one's at work. So now we're really thinking about setting up an operating grant process and actually moving towards multi-year grants, more operating grants and others in ways so that we can really just trust people to use the money the way they need. That shouldn't be dependent on the size of the organization or how long they've been with us, and we should lean in to support them. So we're doing a lot of that work now and really developing that process. So I think that'd be one way.
Okay.
And it's fun. It just feels respectful to do that work. And so we feel really lucky to be in a position to help with it. The work should be fun too.
I agree.
Ellen, I would just lift up our nonprofit capacity building collaborative. I think is a great way that we have brought other funders into an interaction around not just how do we meet the immediate needs of nonprofits with less restrictive funding that is multi-year in nature and a process that's accessible to all, but also how do we use the grants that we've been making and learn from them and hear what nonprofits are telling us they need. And so our initiative is called the Capacity Lab, and it's intentionally named a lab because it's a place for shared learning. And it's a unique place. I say place, it's not even it's a theoretical place, but it's unique in that while funders are supporting that work, we have intentionally created kind of a firewall between the project director, and that individual is building and cultivating relationships with nonprofits. And that relationship needs to be sacrosanct. It needs to be, nonprofits need to be able to share openly and freely. And as much as I like to think that any nonprofit can walk in and tell me anything that's going on in their world, I know they don't feel comfortable doing that because I can't take off the community foundation hat and just be a friend or a colleague. So it's great that they're able to share. And then through the Capacity Lab, we kind of aggregate. So that individual, that project director is aggregating those needs, not telling us, here are the 3 organizations who have, board governance issues that are significant, but instead, I think it's about time we host a board governance training. And so we're able to do some of those shared learning opportunities. And again, deploy dollars for that, but more than anything, it's really just responding to what people tell us they want. I think the other thing we can do is connect nonprofits. We do that through the Capacity Lab. We also do that through our everyday work, where we're talking to 2 different organizations and realizing that they can learn more from each other than they can certainly from us. And so I think that's another great thing we can do is use our power to convene and facilitate in a really community-oriented way. And I think, what I keep hearing when I listen to Michael and when I listen to Kristen, and I hope everyone else is hearing, we all figure this stuff out differently every day. So I hope that what you'll take away is that funders don't have it all figured out. We do the best we can today. And if we learn something tomorrow, we're trying to put that into practice. And please be open and tell us the times when we're missing it or when we're off the mark a little bit. I think that inside every funding organization is someone who does want that feedback.
Thank you. Thank you, Tori. We're coming up on 1 minute and our session is going to end. I mean, this has been so engaging and just inspiring for me. I just love hearing your what you all are doing at each of your organizations. Is there anything that you want to leave with our participants today before we have to end our session? So Kristen, I'll start with you.
Thank you, because I was gonna jump in if you didn't. I want to build on what Tori just said about funders. We don't have it all figured out, right? Our organization, we are a funder and a fundee, right? So we're all the things, and we still don't know all the things. And I think the biggest takeaway is never be afraid to try something new. That's why we can be innovative. We have the ability to be innovative. I don't want to be old and stale in our grant making or in our policies or in our practices. That's when we become irrelevant. And I think that community foundations and other foundations always have a place to be relevant as long as we are willing to continue to innovate. So that's my parting comment.
So I want to thank our panelists for today. And so I just like to thank Kristen, Michael, and Tori for joining us today and sharing with us the wonderful things that they're each doing in their region. And I promise that I will be following up with you guys because I've heard some great things that I want to follow up on and learn more about. So again, I want to say thank you for spending time with us today. Thank you to our participants who came and spent time with us today.